You're listening to Florida Matters. I'm Matthew Petty. Florida's 2025 legislative session is underway. Top issues you'll hear lawmakers debate over the next 2 months include immigration, firearms rules, and housing and insurance. Governor Ron DeSantis began the session with his annual speech laying out his vision for the state.
We have stood in the breach and protected our people from noxious ideologies and trendy but empty social fads. We chose freedom over fear. We chose education over indoctrination. We have chosen law and order over rioting and disorder.
Well, coming up over the next 30 minutes, you're going to hear analysis of the governor's speech and the rebuttal from the Democratic House leader, Fentrice Driskell from Tampa. Veteran political journalist William March is with us, and reporter Meghan Bowman, who's part of WUSF State Government Reporting Team. Thank you both for joining me. So immigration has dominated the national conversation. DeSantis brought it up early in his speech.
Now we are convening for the regular legislative session, having already enacted groundbreaking legislation to fulfill the historic mandate of delivering on President Donald Trump's mandate to end the illegal immigration crisis once and for all. No state has done more, and no state did it sooner than we did in the free state of Florida. Thanks to recent legislation, it's now a crime to enter Florida illegally. The days of catch and release are over, and all state and local law enforcement agencies have a duty to insist in interior immigration enforcement efforts. The voters have spoken, and Florida has responded. We will be part of the solution, not part of the problem.
Well, that's DeSantis laying out his vision for immigration enforcement in Florida. Now, William, is DeSantis actually setting the agenda on immigration? I mean, there was some pushback from lawmakers earlier in the year.
Well, he certainly proposed his own agenda, his own anti-illegal immigration agenda. The legislature, however, given that DeSantis is now a lame duck for the first time since he's been governor, rebelled and moved in a somewhat different direction. They eventually kissed and made up and got together on a piece of legislation. He has not yet gotten on board with the next step that the legislature may take, which is cracking down on employers who hire illegal immigrants.
Mm-hmm. What are you expecting out of this session on immigration? It's yet to be seen. It sounds like there's a little bit of kind of wait and see in terms of what laws actually come out of the session.
Well, it is yet to be seen. Probably the most significant proposal is this. While the legislature has passed very tough measures affecting illegal immigrants themselves, eliminating in-state tuition for children who were brought here from other countries illegally, imposing a mandatory death penalty for illegal immigrants who commit crimes, and, as DeSantis said in his speech, making it a crime to come into Florida if you're an illegal immigrant or to bring another person in. What they have never done over years of talking tough about illegal immigration, what they have never done is attack the actual cause that brings illegal immigrants here, which is employment. There are now proposals to require all employers to check on the immigration status of their employees. There has been a loophole-ridden requirement for that previously, but even that was never enforced. So now there's a proposal, and the question is, will the legislature work up the spine to impose these requirements on some of the biggest and most powerful industries in Florida, the development industry, construction, tourism, and agriculture?
Yeah. Well, some of you have been sharing your thoughts about what you think lawmakers should focus on this session, and Meghan Bowman has been talking with people about immigration. Let's just take a listen to some of what people have said.
The feeling from the Hispanic community is that we have been targeted. We're being singled out.
Florida, does have a good amount of illegal immigrants, and that's the problem, especially the criminal. I mean, well, they're all criminals because they broke the law when they came into the country, but the ones that committed crimes specifically are going to be the biggest harm to your communities.
It's really troubling for me, and just like on a personal level, emotional level, because I don't think people should have to go through that type of treatment, even if they're here in kind of a non-traditional route or an undocumented or have an undocumented status.
We just heard there from Benjamin in Tampa, and before that, Michael Fusella, also from Tampa, and Alicio Santana in Clearwater. Now, Meghan, you're part of a new project that we are calling Your Florida, and your assignment is to listen to what Floridians want state officials to address. What are some of the takeaways for you about how people are talking about immigration and how it affects them?
Right. So that first voice that we heard, Alicio Santana, he works with a group that serves the Hispanic population throughout Florida. He received a phone call from a person who is without legal status. They had an infection and were scared to get care. So Alicio, of course, he said that is terrible that they have this infection, but mostly they're walking around with that infection around other people. So there is that worry that if people are sick, they might get other people sick. Now, for Alicio himself, he says he personally felt as a Puerto Rican like people are looking at him and wondering if he even has legal status, which is something he's had his whole life. And then we hear from Benjamin, who really feels as, he has a family, and it's really hitting him on an emotional level, seeing families being split up. And that's kind of where he was coming from. So, we're hearing that side of things. Mm-hmm. But then also, like Michael said, technically, right? People are coming into the country illegally. That is a crime. And, that's something that he's focused on. So we're really hearing both sides of this issue.
Yeah. And we'll be hearing a lot more of that as the session unfolds, no doubt. Now, lawmakers have tried in the past to loosen restrictions on gun ownership in Florida. This year is no different. And during his address, Governor DeSantis said he wanted to make Florida even friendlier to gun owners.
Now, the free state of Florida has not exactly led the way on protecting Second Amendment rights. We have some of the more weak laws on the country compared to our other states who consider themselves conservative. I would ask you to protect people's Second Amendment rights. Look back in instances where legislation may have been passed in recent years, such as shifting the burden on red flag laws, such as taking away the rights of young adults to be able to purchase firearms, such as limiting somebody's ability to both keep and to bear arms, as our Constitution does. We need to be a strong Second Amendment state. I know many of you agree with it, and so let's get some positive reform done for the people of this state of Florida.
All right, so, William, there are some moves to roll back some of the laws that were enacted after the Parkland school shooting 7 years ago. And just a reminder, 17 people died, 17 were injured, most of them students. What legislation is up for debate, and what's the significance of it?
Well, following that Parkland shooting, the two most important things the legislature did, and they did these under intense public pressure and outrage as a result of that high school massacre, they raised the age limit to buy a rifle, a long gun, from 18 to 21, and they enacted red flag laws. These allow law enforcement to take guns away from people who have been determined to be dangerous, for example, domestic abusers and so on. There are proposals to repeal those red flag laws, to drop the age limit for a rifle back down to 18 where it was before. In other words, to repeal the actions taken after the Parkland shooting. Mm-hmm. In addition to that, DeSantis wants open carry of firearms to be legal. Already, we've repealed the requirement to have a permit for concealed carry weapon. He wants open carry. There's proposals to legalize carrying guns on college campuses. One notably, the state Senate President, Ben Albritton, has made it known he is not in favor of repealing the red flag laws. Mm-hmm. As Senate President, he has authority that could conceivably prevent that.
Yeah. Well, the governor didn't mention Parkland. What did you make of that?
Well, he didn't mention Parkland. What he said was enacted a few years ago, and what he didn't say was that these proposals were enacted as a result of public outrage over this shooting. Yep. And he obviously did not want to remind people that happened. It happened with a young man under 18 with a rifle.
Yeah. Now, you've been sharing your thoughts on guns too. Here's what Lynn Miller of Ocala had to say about gun legislation.
When I went to school, all we worried about was bullies. We didn't worry about guns. We didn't worry about knives. We didn't think we'd die at school. It was never in the thought. But the legislators just keep pushing the gun thing. And it's not about gun control. It's about gun safety.
All right, so Meghan, what else did people tell you about guns?
So again, I've heard for and against. Now, Michael, who is a University of South Florida student, he believes all of the rights, the standard should be at 18.
I don't think, you're 21 and, suddenly you gain all your rights. You know what I mean? I think the standard should be at 18.
Why can you go to war? Why can you do these things, but you can't buy a gun? But going off of what William said, the proposal for open carry on college campuses, I did talk to Michael a little bit about that, and he did say on that specific issue, he's not so sure about that. Mm-hmm. Other people have been completely against it. Another gentleman said, the bills passed after Parkland were a good first step. So rolling them back goes against everything we're trying to do to be positive.
Yeah. You're listening to Florida Matters and a conversation about the governor's annual address launching the legislative session. You're hearing from WUSF reporter Meghan Bowman and political journalist William March. More in a moment on the governor's speech and the rebuttal from Florida Democrats. You're listening to Florida Matters. I'm Matthew Petty, along with political journalist William March and WUSF reporter Meghan Bowman, who's part of your Florida State government reporting team here at WUSF. Well, Governor Ron DeSantis kicked off the legislative session in Tallahassee this morning with his annual State of the State address, and insurance, which has been in a state of crisis for several years now, came up in the governor's speech.
Now, the legislature in recent years has enacted historic reforms that have improved economic conditions and has addressed very difficult issues like insurance. Because of these reforms, automobile insurance rates are scheduled to come down this year, between 6 and 10.5% average reductions amongst the three largest companies, even as rates continue to skyrocket nationwide. And our homeowners insurance market is seeing stability. 11 new companies have entered the market over the past year. 130,000 new private policies were put into effect in 2024. And last year, believe it or not, S&P Global rated Florida as having the lowest increases amongst all 50 states. We were also recently able to announce that in 2025, 73% of Citizens property insurance homeowners in Miami-Dade County are scheduled to receive a decrease on average of 6.3%.
All right, so William, just thinking about what we heard from the governor there, how do those comments track with what's actually happening in homeowners and property insurance and auto insurance markets in Florida?
Well, the governor, frankly, cherry-picked a couple of favorable-sounding statistics, some rate decreases by Citizens, the public insurance company, in one county, Miami-Dade, lower increases in premiums. A small increase doesn't help much when your home insurance policy costs you more than $4,000 a year, which is the average in Florida, and reduced auto premiums. Reduced auto premiums are fine, but it's property insurance premiums that are causing home ownership difficulties in the state. DeSantis mentioned actions taken in the past by the legislature, which he said have stabilized the market. What those actions did, of course, was basically prevent people from suing insurance companies. Mm-hmm. What they didn't prevent, a newspaper investigation recently found by the Tampa Bay Times, was insurance companies using loopholes to hide profits and then claim that they were insolvent. And the legislature, in the wake of that, there have been proposals in the legislature to try to crack down on that and close those loopholes.
Mm-hmm. Meghan, what have people been telling you about insurance, whether it's auto insurance or homeowners insurance?
Haven't heard too much about auto insurance, but across the board, affordability in insurance is a big topic. And, we're talking to people in person and online. And so a user on Instagram actually said the state should find an affordable home insurance solution. And they say Citizens is not it. Like William said, DeSantis, he lauded great efforts by state lawmakers last year, but many of the people I spoke with say there's still a long way to go. Like Benjamin in Tampa, he told me his house was damaged during the last hurricane season, but his deductible is so high that he's unable to make a claim. So he's essentially paying for home insurance that he can't use. So he says he thinks the state should intervene to make it more affordable. Across the aisle, it seems to everybody to agree on there needs to be work on insurance.
Right, but does that translate, William, into lawmakers actually making some substantial steps towards fixing the crisis?
We will see. There is some anger in the legislature that it took a newspaper investigation to reveal some of the problems in the market. So it's possible they may act. Another thing they're very likely to do is refund or replenish the My Safe Florida Home program. The last 2 years, this is a grant program that helps you harden your home against hurricane damage. And as a result, the idea is you hopefully will be able to get a break on your insurance premiums. Well, the program was extremely popular. It quickly ran out of money both years. They're going to try it again with more money. And the problem has been that only about half of the people who applied actually got grants, and only about half of those got an insurance premium discount as a result. They may work on that as well.
Yeah. DeSantis also leaned into the idea of Florida as a tax-free state in his speech. Let's just take a listen.
Florida is a free state in part because we are a low-tax state. We have one of the top 5 tax environments in the nation, famously have no income tax, and we've enacted billions of dollars in tax relief over the past 6 years. We must continue to be a friend to the taxpayer. Now, in addition to our traditional tax holidays, I'm proposing we add holidays for marine fuel to help our boaters and anglers enjoy Florida's waters, as well as a Second Amendment summer for the purchases of firearms, ammo, and accoutrements. Florida remains the only state in America to tax business rent. And while we've reduced the rate of the tax, it is time to eliminate it altogether.
William, thoughts on where lawmakers might end up on some of the ideas that DeSantis has talked about?
Well, my guess is the sales tax holidays will sail through the legislature. Governor DeSantis also wants to eliminate the property tax, as he said in his speech. But what he did not say was how the revenue from those taxes would be replaced. Property taxes, of course, provide more than half of the support for public schools, and something like a fifth, maybe a bit short of a fifth, of the revenue for city and county governments.
Yeah, I mean, he did lean into that idea. Essentially, his vision was that, in his speech at least, as he said, was that these local governments are unfairly kind of recouping money from homeowners and not putting it towards good purpose. So the fact that we are a state with no state income tax means the money's got to come from somewhere to kind of fund these essential services.
Well, property tax, of course, is the traditional means of support for local governments. And DeSantis, as I mentioned, did not say what would replace it. It's something like $43 billion a year in Florida. What DeSantis actually said in his speech is that he applauds the idea that legislators are doing a study that could result in a constitutional amendment abolishing property tax to go on the 2026 ballot. Whether that's likely to happen is not entirely certain. Again, Ben Albritton, one of the 2 most powerful people in the legislature as Senate president, has said it seems to him unlikely that during a 60-day legislative session they'll be able to tackle a topic that complicated and that consequential.
Yeah. Education has been a key part of the governor's so-called war on woke in the past few years. Here's what DeSantis had to say about it in his speech.
We've been ranked #1 in America for the past 2 years. We are the top state in America for school choice, and our school choice program has changed lives. Joining us today is Harley McCullough, whose son Thorne is a recipient of Florida's Family Empowerment Scholarship for Unique Abilities. Her son Thorne attends the Jacksonville School for Autism simply because of the scholarship that has been enacted in the state of Florida. He can now pursue an education that fits his unique needs instead of being forced into a one-size-fits-all approach. And stories like Thorne are legion up and down the state of Florida. Our universal school choice program works. Families and students have benefited, and the academic bar has been raised throughout the state. It's a great testament to the members of the Florida legislature that we were the first state to enact such an ambitious and far-reaching choice program. We also recognize the importance of recruiting and retaining great teachers. We have enacted a teacher's Bill of Rights. We've provided protection against coerced union dues, and we have invested a record $4.6 billion towards raising teacher salaries.
A lot of what we heard from the governor is not necessarily new, William. I mean, we have heard, teachers saying we're not getting paid enough. There's been moves to raise teacher pay and the like. School choice has been a contentious issue on some sides. You know, some people are very much in favor of it, others aren't. Put this all in context of it. Like, how is education faring in Florida? How are teachers doing?
Well, as to how education is faring, the governor said that Florida has been ranked number 1 in the nation for education 2 years in a row. That comes from the U.S. News and World Report rankings, which are based largely on graduation rates, tuition prices, and debt by graduates when they graduate. Mm-hmm. If you look at other measures, the picture's not quite as rosy. On the NAEP, National Assessment of Education Program, Florida's eighth grade reading and math scores are in the 40s, not number 1, and both 4th and 8th grade reading scores have been declining. In terms of teachers' salaries, I think that Florida is near the bottom of the nation in teacher salaries. It may be the bottom. The Florida Education Association, which is the public school teachers union, says that the governor's education budget proposal will do very little to change that.
Yeah. Meghan, are folks talking to you about education? Is this something that comes up a lot?
Yeah, I've heard a little bit about education, mostly funding for it. Mm-hmm. That, this is a big concern. Again, on Instagram, we've heard that, and in person. Another person we talked to, Jim, had concerns about what he called a red herring of parental choice in education. He views it as a way to divert taxpayer funds to wealthy corporations. Kind of like you said, parental choice. Some are for it, some are against it. What I've heard, though, as far as education goes, is that they want to actually put money into educating and not the culture wars.
Right. Florida Democrats responded to the governor with speeches from Senate Minority Leader Jason Pizzo and House Minority Leader Fentrice Driskell of Tampa. And let's just take a listen to some of what Driskell said.
We understand the political reality of Tallahassee, so we know these ideas aren't likely to go anywhere, regardless of how good they are. It isn't easy being in the minority party in the legislature, but we aren't Democrats only when it's easy. We're here to advocate for our communities and make our voices heard, and that's what we'll be doing. Unfortunately, because he thinks it's better for his career, Governor DeSantis is happy to put on a show to try to convince you that he's on your side. But his policies have hurt all of us as costs increase and services decrease.
There's not a lot that Democrats can do, William. They don't have a huge amount of room to maneuver. They're in a minority, supermajority in the Republican side. So what stood out for you about Fentrice Driskell's speech?
Well, what Driskell said was that the governor didn't propose a plan to solve some of the problems that Floridians are having. The main thing that she mentioned was affordable housing, and property insurance is part of that, but construction costs and so on are also part of it. And to an extent, yes, she's correct. He did not lay out a specific agenda for lowering housing costs. He did not lay out a specific agenda for lowering insurance costs. But as she mentioned and as you emphasized, Republicans have supermajorities and Democrats have historically small minorities in both houses of the legislature, which means that Democrats will have essentially little or basically no influence at all on what legislation passes in this session.
When we look ahead to the next couple of months, there is plenty of serious debate on the horizon, but there's some less serious things too, like a proposal to switch the state bird from mockingbird to flamingo. And here's what some of you had to say about the state bird.
I feel that the state bird being a flamingo will bring attention to the issue of the flamingo, and that I don't think there's many in the wild now. I love the history of the mockingbird, being a part of our history in Florida, and it's largely throughout the entire state. So kind of divided.
I think I'll keep it as mockingbird because that's cuter.
Meghan, are people fired up about the possibility of naming a new state bird?
This one, Half and half. I think some people are definitely team mockingbird and some people are team flamingo, but I went out, I asked him, hey, which way do you fly, right? What bird do you want? And a couple of people were saying because of the history of the mockingbird, they think it is integral to Florida's history. So that's why they want to keep it. And they don't care that other states also have it as the state bird. For others, they think the flamingo is more vibrant, more fun. And one person said it more fits the vibe of Florida.
Yeah. Okay. It depends on where you stand or where you fly, I suppose. William, just to wrap up here, final thoughts on DeSantis' speech. What was the biggest takeaway for you?
The biggest takeaway for me is that he repeatedly portrayed Florida as the leading state in the nation in many, many ways, combating immigration, economic development and jobs, government frugality, defeating woke ideology. Over and over again, he said the free state of Florida is the leader among states. Anti-illegal immigration measures was the thing he opened with. It's really hard not to see that as the precursor to a campaign theme in his next run for president. It's known that he has further political ambitions. What he's saying is, I made Florida the best state in the nation. I'll do the same thing for the nation as a whole. It's going back to the Make America Florida theme of his unsuccessful 2024 campaign.
And Meghan, just finally remind us what people can expect from the Your Florida team, WUSF State Government Reporting Project.
We are out there talking to people, whether you reach out online, whether you go to WUSF.org and scroll down to the Your Florida box, fill out our online form, Instagram. We want to hear from you, and we're taking all of your comments, all of your suggestions, and we're looking into that for you. You're asking and we're answering. And so that is really the main point of Your Florida.
Well, that's our show for this week. Thanks to political journalist William March and WUSF reporter Meghan Bowman, part of our new state government team. Engineering support from Jackson Harp. Grayson Doctor is our executive producer. Assistance from Mary Shedden. You can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and find us on YouTube. I'm Matthew Petty. Thank you for listening.